Okay. Good morning, everyone. For those who I haven't met before, my name is Michael Thurston. I'm the General Manager of Destination North Coast. So firstly, we would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. We appreciate the complexity of funding and support available and wanted to assist our stakeholders in navigating these challenges. A recent industry survey that we conducted clearly indicated that this specific topic was the area that you were most seeking assistance with. There's quite a bit to get through, and we want to ensure that we can answer as many questions as possible. So we'll keep moving forward. Housekeeping, all audience members will be muted throughout this. We suggest that a lot of you turn off your videos just because it seems to help the bandwidth of the collective there. Our guest presenter is here today to break down funding that is available at this current time. In this dynamic environment that we are operating in, the protocols of funding currently available are likely to change over time. So this is a snapshot of right now. Our presenter works in an accountancy firm and is not associated with any government department. As a result, he is not able to predict or advise what the different levels of government may do moving forward. I would like to introduce and thank our presenter for assisting with today's meeting and providing their professional guidance for our industry. So without further ado, let's introduce Chartered Accountant Jack Dixon of Back Beach Accounting. Back Beach Accounting is a boutique accounting firm based on the mid-north coast and servicing the Coffs Harbour region and beyond. They are an approachable, proactive partner to the businesses that they collaborate with. Their focus is on delivering a satisfying client experience through using best-in-class technology. They're also a 1% for the profit for the Planet member and have committed to donating 1% of sales turnover to local, environmentally focused not-for-profits. Just in regards to questions, we have the chat function. So if you want to submit a question, please submit it through the chat function. I'll then collate all the questions, group any like-for-like questions, and we can address them at the end of the presentation. So over to you now, Jack. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. Good to have a little bit of an introduction there. It saved me my effort at the beginning here. But a bit about me. I run a small chartered accounting practice up here in Coffs, which is maybe south of a lot of you guys. There's lots of tech focus in what I do, so pretty easy to access and help people all up and down the coast. I'll sort of step us through what we're looking at today. So a little bit about Back Beach. It's a chartered accounting firm. We're pretty addicted to zero. After you use zero, it's kind of hard to go back. 1% for the planet, which is it's the guy behind Patagonia that put 1% for the planet in motion. So if you have any interest in the environment, that's a pretty good cause, and it doesn't cost a lot to be involved. In terms of what we'll cover today, I'm going to go through some sort of general stuff very early on and just sort of set the tone for the presentation today. And then we're going to dive in, probably spend our time around these 3 grants. I want to keep, there's a lot of technical stuff in this, but I kind of want to just gloss over it. I think it's more helpful and more meaningful to just talk, I think, in terms of practically what you can do to look for assistance and then to maybe talk through some examples of what I'm seeing in my day-to-day and what has worked and what hasn't worked. Because there's been a lot of announcements all at once, and it has caused a lot of confusion. A lot of people feel a bit overwhelmed by just the breadth of information. We touched on, I think, a few things at the end. I put them kind of into the other category. Some of these moving pieces that are still sort of being announced. There's one for accommodation providers, which we know a little bit about, but not too much just yet. Cool. So in terms of opening comments, it's important to know that this whole preso is pretty well general in nature. If you need answers like specific to your circumstances, you really should have a chat with your accountant. Try to make things easy for them by just keeping your things up to date. Probably that point that I just quickly mentioned there on helping them to help you. By that, I mean to imply that what I've seen is a lot of people that are a bit nervous to put their hand up and apply for some of these grants, but they may well be eligible. They may be very close to being eligible. And I just want to communicate that the government wants to help. It's a lot easier for them to just keep an existing business going, to tide them through a rough patch, than to have the business fold and then everything have to get set up all over again. So they want to help. These grants are here to help. So definitely, reach out and take advantage where you can. In terms of a suggested approach, I would say, yep, when you are sort of dealing with those government departments, just help yourself, keep your accounting records up to date. That'll make things easy and quick for your accountant. Just be totally transparent in your applications. And I'll touch on that as we go through. And I just think keep support documents behind the applications going in. I don't think in cases where maybe your circumstances could be either side of fitting the eligibility, like just in or just out. What has been communicated through to us is it's a matter of intention. They probably in due course, Service New South Wales, when they have the chance out the other side of this to look at things in detail, they might audit some of these applications. It doesn't seem that they're going to be coming down on unintentional, oh, whoops, we got the grant money, but we weren't really entitled. So you just want to have, like, I suppose, good support documents in case it ever did come into question. Cool. And this presentation is mostly going to focus on the business grants, the business assistance that's available, the business support programs. We're not really going to touch on the individual stuff, which is mostly just a matter of talking to Centrelink. Cool. So the first one's the COVID-19 business grant, which has probably been the most widely advertised and talked about. It's $7.5 grand, $10.5 grand, or 15 grand, depending on sales downturn going down. So in summary, these are the big parts of it. Up to 15 grand as a one-off. It depends on your sales downturn of the business going down. It's tax-free. So that's been announced. And lots of these grants, they're pretty well, most of them are. They've been put into the category of non-assessable, non-exempt, so they'll be tax-free. This one's aimed at businesses that are basically GST registered, if you wanted to make it simple, but the turnover, like you've had sales of 75 grand to 50 million for the 2020 financial year. So to be clear, a financial year is the year to June, whatever year. So we're talking July 2019 to June 2020. It is aimed at employers. I'll come back at that. Not-for-profits and sole traders are fine. It's aimed at employers seemingly, but yeah, I'll touch on this a little later. There's an application deadline on this one, which is coming up. It was, I think, 13th of September, and they've moved it to 1st October. So there's another week or so, but then that'll be off the table. And the intention is that this is supposed to cover business costs, things like wages, utilities, rent, professional advice, legal, accounting, whatever. Marketing's a good one. The intention is that, and I understand that that's part of the application, is you need to put forward what you'll spend the money on if you get it. And it's supposed to be a one-off payment just to cover that initial lockdown period. The intention is that that's that sort of, I think it was 26th June through to about 17th July. The intention is that this grant is supposed to help you for that period of loss. After that, job saver is supposed to kick in. The eligibility piece on this grant is that basically that you're running a business. These are all things just to show that you're running a business. You didn't just put together an ABN and can I have the money now? So they're easy things. The business has got an ABN. It was operating at the beginning of June this year. It had annual wages under 10 mil a year ago, basically. It's got this same deadline. I just wanted to reiterate. And in terms of how much the payout is, that's in that table there at the right, but it's around how big a turnover you're able to demonstrate. If it's over the 30%, it's a 7.5 grand payout. If it's over 50%, it's 10.5. And if it's over 70%, it's 15 grand. That comparison for anyone that hasn't seen the moving parts of that is basically just picking a 14-day period that's consecutive in the 26th June to 17 July that has just gone, and then showing that it's 30% worse, 50%, 70% worse than the same period either in 2019, in 2020, or if your business didn't exist, or even if it did exist, you're able to use any of these as a comparable period. But that last bullet point is the fortnight just before the lockdown. Okay. In practice, the way that the COVID-19 business grant is going is businesses are putting these applications in themselves. You can nominate your accountant to go and go into bat for you, so to speak. but it's going to be a lot more complicated than it needs to be. There's identity checks throughout where they're going to ask for a driver's license, a Medicare card, I think. They ask for a few things. It's important to demonstrate the link between the Sydney lockdowns and your business. So I'm in Coffs, but the story of anyone further up the coast is going to be really similar. We're a tourist town, so of course we're impacted. There's a lot of businesses here in hospitality and tourism and accommodation that suffered as a direct result of Sydney basically just getting told to stay home. So that's pretty easy to sort of explain. For this grant, you do need the accountant's letter. So the work involved basically when someone approaches me needing help here there is a template letter you can just rip off from the Service New South Wales website, but it's not just that your accountant's just copy pasting that. We do have to go through and check your numbers. We will be looking for the best 14 days we can find you to get you the best outcome. So there is some calculations that go on, put together the letter, and obviously we've got to sign off on it. So there's an integrity piece. You shouldn't, I just mean to say, please don't push your accountant and just think like it's an easy copy paste. Like they have to put their name to it, so it has to be done properly. I would say tips in dealing with your accountant, and these are totally practically intended. We've just had so many of these come in the door, and everyone needs help urgently. It just as a matter of common sense is that organised clients are just getting priority. So if there's like an accounting file, a cloud accounting file, something like Xero or MyOb has, it doesn't really matter what you use in terms of your accounting, but if it's up to date, it's easy for us to run those calculations, pull out the figures and get you your letter. Whereas I have also seen some businesses that haven't kept things up to date, just quickly need the money in a hurry. Of course, we're going to get to them, but there's a bigger job in organising all their paperwork basically before we can get them the letter. So there's a lesson in all that, not just for this situation, but in having your records constantly up to date, and cloud accounting makes that really easy. You're always ready to make the right decision for your business, be it for grants or selling or just realizing what's working and what's not within your business. The other one is some of these, part of this application, in terms of proving that your business existed, you need to submit like a last year tax return or a recent BAS. So again, I've had some clients that haven't kept those up to date, and that's just slowed the progress basically, because that's got to happen first before the grant application can go in. I wanted to touch briefly on the wages element. It's not just that the COVID-19 business grant is there to help employing businesses. It seems to be that it's more about putting an upper limit on businesses. It's more about saying like we're only going to help not big conglomerates. You guys have seen all this stuff in the news about Harvey Norman basically taking JobKeeper for a ride and whatnot, and some of these big businesses that maybe didn't need the government assistance. It's more about capping that. It's not about saying you need to employ people to help you. It's more about saying we're just going to put an upper limit so that massive employers, this money is not really going to help them. So there are these like pieces of information that totally indicate you don't need to have employees, or you could be a sole trader that's not actually set yourself up on payroll. You can still be eligible for this grant, and I've seen successful applications go through. So don't let that put you off if you don't employ. And yeah, there's also this area of, even if you don't quite fit, if your business doesn't quite fit the sort of straightforward eligibility that I just run through there, there's all these other ways in, these alternative circumstances. So they're worth exploring and having a chat with your accountant to see if you have another way in. A lot of these where they come up or where you might go with these alternative rules is if you're a new business, or like circumstantially what I've seen in practice is there are businesses that didn't have the 2019 year as a comparative, but they did have the 2022 weeks, but that wasn't really a good representation of how successful the business used to be, because, June, July 2020, a lot of us were just right at the beginning of COVID and things were shut, and which is why they kind of gave us that third, the 2 weeks just before the lockdown happened here, as like they're trying to get the money to you, work with them to make that happen. This next little section, I'm going to run through, I think, some high-level case studies. So these are like real applications I've seen gone in, the circumstances and sort of the outcomes of them. This first one, RD, that's a cafe that employed people and it was a company. It was one of the very early applications. So at that point, you couldn't nominate to say, I'll go with the 2 weeks just before lockdown. They only had the 2019 or the 2020 comparative as what you could use to show that things have gotten worse since that time. The curveball here is that in 2019, that cafe existed, but it wasn't this business owner that owned it. They bought it, I think, around October or December in 2019. So they didn't have a 2019. And then in 2020, obviously things were really bad because they were closed essentially. So it was hard to show that between 2020 and most recently in 2021 that sales had gone down. But we did find a way in by basically putting forward an application based on saying, we want to compare against 2019. This person didn't own the business at that time, but we have the FPOS, like the point of sale records. We had that kind of data available. So we could put it forward and say, this is what the business used to earn at that time 2 years ago. And looking at what's coming in now, it's gone down considerably. So that's totally doesn't quite fit the rules, but we just put it forward as a please would you help us, please would you consider this application in the letter. The downturn percentage was nearly at that 70% bracket. It came in at 67% or so. But we did ask, look, would you please consider us for the 70% bracket? Because what the business owner had sort of suggested to me is I have the FPOS records, I don't have the cash records. So there would have been even more sales basically. So we asked nicely, could you consider us for 70% bracket? They ended up giving us the 50%, which is still really a win because basically fitting the eligibility on the business grant, on this grant, it's all the same eligibility for JobSaver. And that's the very helpful grant that's going to keep a lot of businesses going. So I think if you gain access to this grant at whatever threshold, it's already massively helpful. This second application, so I'm not going to go into this one in detail. They were pretty similar to the last guys, running a cafe, had only sort of newly acquired it. I just want to demonstrate this is some of the work that's going on in the background with your accountant. This is us trying to find the period of time, the 14-day period that showed the worst outcome to basically get them the most grant money as we could. So one of these boxes here is I think it was the 20, yeah, we're doing the 2020 year, and the other one is the 2021 year. And then we're running all these calculations up the top to find like the 14 days. So if we'd gone with the June 26th to 9th July, they weren't even going to gain access to the grant because they didn't quite hit that 30% downturn. So we were just running all these different scenario analysis to try and find, I think, what will get them the best outcome. But that's just a little bit to give you a bit of a demonstration of like, yeah, your accountant's not just copy pasting the letter for sure. There's a bit of work in it. So this one is just a guy, he's a sole trader. GST registered, he does like a film director, does some video production and film. So understandably in 2021 with the lockdowns, all these jobs just got canned. He couldn't do anything. People just put it all on hold. He had no money coming in at all. We basically used the comparative of 2019. So he has no employees or anything, applied for the top bracket and yep, he got through successful. The COVID-19 business grant, this is right. So these guys are in the trades. They do a bit of mobile manufacturing. They run their business through a family trust. So there aren't any employees again. They have some contractors that they take on here and there. There's no payroll for the two. It's a family business. So for the husband and wife, they don't run payroll. They just divvy up whatever profit the business might make at the end of the year and deal with the tax then. So just to be clear, there's no employees. Their sales dropped away as well. And yeah, we got them through with a successful application for the top tier claims. Cool. We'll move forward into JobSaver, which is one that's kind of just coming into practice more recently. This is supposed to be at a high level. The way this one works, you could say it's a bit like JobKeeper. It's not too dissimilar, but it's a reimbursement of 1,500 to 100 grand per week. Depends on the size of your payroll. It's a reimbursement, a bit like JobKeeper. It's a backdated pay. So the idea is you've still got to fork out the money to pay your people. And this is a bit of after the fact top up of cash to help you keep going. It's tax free. JobKeeper wasn't. JobKeeper was taxed. This one's tax free. Those amounts, the 1,500, the 100 grand, that's per week, but the payments, the actual payments are going to be made fortnightly. It's 40% of the New South Wales payroll payments of the business. So some people have, like staff that work, they might have some Queensland business as well as some New South Wales payroll as well. In that kind of situation, it's going to be an apportionment exercise where they really just want to help you on the New South Wales side. They're pulling those numbers off the most recent BAS that went in. So if you do your activity statements quarterly, that'll be the March BAS. If you do them monthly, so you do what are called IASs, installment activity statements, they will be basing this estimate off your May IAS. The maths behind it is they're taking that W1 figure, which is your gross wages, dividing it by the number of days and multiplying it by 7. Oops, just jump back. Non-employer businesses can also be eligible. So the amount that's paid is $1,000 a week. That might be, for example, the manufacturing trust that I was saying a moment ago. It looks like they'll be able to get on board with just $1,000 a week. Looking at the sales turnover there, this one again is aimed at, not really small operators like sole traders and that. It's more aimed at people running bigger businesses. The application deadline's a little later with 18th of October. And the idea on that last point down there is that this grant steps in to start helping from the time that the earlier the COVID-19 business support payment finishes, because that was really aimed at helping for that first 3 weeks of lockdown. Eligibility is pretty well similar. It's all the same kind of stuff. So you've got to have an ABN. You need to basically, this is just saying you need to show that you're in business, that you were a legitimate business. You didn't just set up a company now to start ripping money off, So it's all pretty easy things to step through. And if you pass the eligibility in the earlier grant there, the business support grant, you're on board here. Cool. For non-employers, the important thing is it needs to be your primary income. You need to basically, say that more than 50% of the income that I make. So that might be the sole trader, for example. He can't just, you can't just very casually do like a little side gig, for example, and also be getting paid somewhere else. The intention is that it's helping if this is your main sort of source of income. And for employers, there's this obligation that you need to keep your headcount up. You need to keep your employee headcount up. So this is a moving area. After the fact, after we've seen, I think, a bit of drama in the news about JobKeeper and some businesses that maybe didn't need the help and have kept a lot of the money, I think what's going on here is Service New South Wales just basically don't want to get tangled up in the same kind of bad press. So they've kind of, without consulting anyone, they had announced that there's going to be this requirement to every 2 weeks, basically keep like checking numbers and basically saying, yeah, we're still having bad sales. We're still having 30% downturn. They basically announced, yeah, you've got to do that every 2 weeks in order to keep getting paid. Part of that nomination that goes on every 2 weeks is to say we've still got the same headcount. This comes out in emails. From what I understand, business owners are being emailed directly, and they've got to just sort of click through. I think it's quite high level to say I've still got all the same people and I'm still having a downturn. But this like ongoing reporting piece is kind of up for discussion because a lot of the major accounting bodies basically huddled together and have gone into discussions with them to say there's just a huge administrative burden that you're putting on businesses that are struggling and on the accounting industry, which is like completely, we're very busy right now just trying to keep up with this stuff. So those discussions are taking place right now. If I had to guess how that's going to play out, probably there's going to be an ongoing requirement, but maybe it'll step back to once a month instead of once every 2 weeks, which is really burdensome. It's a bit of a watch this space. In practice, the way the job saver piece goes, again, there's these identity checks. For this one, you don't need the accountant letter. The eligibility is the same as the earlier grant, the COVID-19 business grant. So that's, like I was saying, it's kind of the door in. So if you can pass what's required for that earlier grant, the business grant, I think the big win is not really that grant itself, it's access to JobSaver. In terms of the ongoing reporting, what we know so far, what's been proposed is they gave you a bit of a free pass on the first fortnight. You don't need to sort of show a bad 2 weeks for now. That's buying them time while these discussions go on with major accounting bodies. But it seems like whatever you can't, in terms of the ongoing reporting, the initial 2 week comparison period that you chose from 2019 or 2020 or the 2 weeks just before lockdown, that remains as your example, your comparison period. So going forward, you would just be looking at the 2 weeks just gone and how did it go up against your initial comparison period. Keep in mind, again, like there's all these same alternative rules are kind of in play to find a way in for businesses that don't quite fit the bill. So I really would encourage anyone that thinks, oh, I sort of nearly fit this, but I don't quite fit that. Just get an application in and just be honest and transparent. I think like a bad outcome is maybe getting money that you're one day asked to repay because they determined that you shouldn't maybe have gotten that, but don't end up in that situation. Just be completely transparent throughout, keep good records, and help them help you. These are like pretty common FAQs I'm seeing around JobSaver. I don't have employees, can I still qualify? Yeah, there's still that way in. I think it was like $1,000 a week, I believe. I stood down my employees. That doesn't really put you out. There's some Fair Work stuff which goes into sort of human resources domain, but the important thing is just that you're maintaining a connection with your employees, which was really similar with JobKeeper. They just want to tide businesses over so that we can hit the restart button as soon as possible once we're out the other side of the lockdowns. An employee has resigned. If I had to summarize that piece, as part of the ongoing fortnightly or monthly or whatever they're going to end up with requirement, you need to say, yeah, I've still got the same number of employees or not, but you won't be penalized if it's outside of your control for the employee moving on. It's more, I think they're more maybe going to take issue if you cut staff, if it's you that decides I'm firing this person or I'm getting rid of that person, that will, I think, change your outcome there. Whereas someone just moving on because they find work elsewhere or they have a family situation, it's not intended that this should compromise your JobSaver. So there's like a caveat section. There's like basically a bigger employer version of JobSaver. The moving parts look like this. It's named at businesses that have the turnover above 250 million. The payments are fortnightly still, but it seems like the downturn testing is like they want you to look at an example month, basically, instead of an example bad 2 weeks. They want you to show an example bad month. And yeah, this is just basically a little harder to step into as well. You need to show a 50% downturn, not a 30% downturn. I'm not sure how relevant this will be to I suppose, people we've got in the room here. So I might just breeze through, but it is out there, and definitely if that's you, it's worth like starting a discussion with your accountant. Okay, so the micro business grant, the $1,500. $1,500 a fortnight, tax-free. Again, just looking at the annual sales turnover, 30 to 75K. So they're basically just targeting this at smaller operators. That's like, you need to go and get GST registration at 75 grand of sales in a year. So they're obviously just trying to help out, smaller businesses. This one does have a deadline of 18th of October. And it's the same kind of thing. It's intended to cover costs of your business that that could help you get through, basically. This one is not a one-off payment. It's intended to be ongoing from week 1 of lockdown until when the lockdowns ease. Again, there's that similar theme in the eligibility there, just about basically proving that you're a legitimate business. You have an ABN, you existed before any of this happened, your business existed. You had sales last year. There's all those same alternative tests. If your business wasn't quite in operation in the 2020 year, there's these alternative ways to determine your way in. And yeah, there's not the brackets on this one of showing a 30% downturn, 50% or 70% to get a higher payout, because it's just a flat payout. It's that $1,500. So you need to show a 30% sales downturn. You've got, 2019, 2020, or the 2 weeks before the lockdown to use as a comparative period. Okay, so this one is written out as though it works like this for non-employers and this for employers. The reality is, it can't just kind of just be a side hustle. For the non-employer piece, it needs to be what you basically mainly do to make money. It needs to be your primary income. For the employer piece, there's this requirement that you maintain your headcount from 13 July onwards, a bit similar to JobSaver, but it's a bit of a non-issue because a lot of the time, just businesses of that size probably don't employ. Like if you're employing people, your sales are probably over 75 grand, and then you're not looking at this grant. So it's just a bit of a, I don't know, the rules are here, but they're probably not really going to come into play so much. There is, similar to JobSaver, an ongoing requirement to keep reporting sales downturn being worse than 30%. So just the thing to make clear here is the first grant that we discussed, the COVID-19 Business Support Grant, that one, and then the lead into JobSaver is basically just aimed at businesses that have that higher turnover above 75 grand. If you had to really simplify it, it's aimed at people that are running businesses with sales over 75 grand. Whereas this one's intended to be an ongoing support payment in place of those other two for kind of probably more like sole traders and just small businesses, people that probably don't employ, but they are making, I suppose they have sales between 30 and 75 grand a year. I mean, they've kind of put that lower bracket on it of 30 grand because I suppose they had to. Otherwise, maybe they'd be dealing with people who've just pulled together a personal ABN and said, I have a business, I make $1,000 a year. They're just trying to put some integrity into it. The micro business grant. So in practice, you don't need the accountant's letter. You just put through the application yourself. There are identity checks in there. I have had on this piece in my personal experience, I've basically just been helping people who wanted to soundboard, who just wanted to say, look, I don't need your letter, but you know my numbers and you know my circumstances, and what are your thoughts, basically, if I'd be able to apply for this one. And I've got a good example coming up. Again, like lots of these grants, it's about demonstrating a link between the lockdowns and your business. That piece about the ongoing reporting, again, it's just because they've said there's going to be fortnightly reporting required to keep getting paid. It's a moving piece, that. And there are these alternative rules. So as an example, I had this guy who runs a little woodworking operation out of he's got a shed on his property in his backyard, right? So he does that. That's his main source of income. He doesn't work too much, makes a little bit of money. There's no employees. It's just a sole trader business. And he basically came to me because he was nervous, saying, I don't know if I should apply for that. I don't know if I'm really entitled. What am I really supposed to spend the money on? Basically, I don't have a lot of costs. Should I be doing this or not? And he'd said, sure, it would help me if I had the money to pay the mortgage. But I kind of just, that's my home mortgage, and I kind of have enough stock. I don't immediately need to go out and buy wood. I don't have wages to pay. But if you go and look at, I suppose, these are just suggestions. These are just suggestions off Service New South Wales website that these kind of business costs are totally legitimate reasons to put the money towards. marketing being one there. So he talked to me about how he had been intending but could never find the time to basically just get the business a bit better known, and he wanted to get a website up. But the guy works with his hands, in carpentry, basically. He doesn't know how to build a website. So we chatted through sort of, if you had the funding, couldn't you pay someone to build your website properly? And you could put some promotions maybe in a local magazine or something, or just Facebook advertising or something. And yeah, he said that's something he'd been thinking about. So I encouraged him to just be completely transparent, get his application in, and tell them what he intended to spend money on. And yeah, he successfully applied. So he made his way into that grant. And in terms of, I think, just what would be sensible going forward is just, you're going to nominate what you'll spend the funds on. So for him, that's basically marketing. Just spend the money on marketing. Like, don't have them come back at some later time and say, look, could you just prove that you spent the money on what you said you were going to? I mean, just keep your invoices of what the website cost and what some of the sort of advertising you've done had cost. Just keep that stuff in a folder somewhere. Is a good way to sort of have a bit of peace of mind, I think, around it. Other is kind of the section where I've just put everything that I think didn't quite fit anywhere else. So again, this really has like a business focus to it, but there are some rent relief areas that are basically being put out there where landlords are required to offer rent relief proportionate to your downturn percentage. This is working in a similar way that it did with JobKeeper, where you really have to, in the first instance, try and meet each other in the middle somewhere there. It's not supposed to be that we just stop paying the rent and get really standoffish, because, and just realistically think about it. This is going to end, and out the other side of it, we still need to have a good relationship with the landlord. So mediations and negotiations are encouraged. And if you did, as a base minimum requirement, if your business was eligible for the the COVID-19 business support, that was the 7.5 to 15 grand grant. Whatever threshold you got in on, they're supposed to match. The rent relief is supposed to be proportionate to the downturn percentage. And it was similar with JobKeeper, but it's basically been that the waiver should be like, they should just basically give you a free pass on rent of at least 50% and defer the balance. They might just stack it into say, all right, cool, well, you'll keep paying rent and the payments will be a little more to make up for this missed period, or they might extend the length of the lease a couple of months or something to catch up the payments. It's kind of down to what you negotiate. There's some other relief for land tax and around payroll tax. So those are going to be like bigger employees in particular. The 25% payroll tax waiver. So that's something to be aware of, I suppose, if you have a high wage bill above 1.2 million. They're basically just pushing back dates on that stuff, so you can get your annual reconciliation in a bit late and make payments a little later. They're just giving you a bit of cash flow relief there. But again, like, I think in the spirit of the entire way this has been handled, for lots of these grants, we're talking about Service New South Wales, but I've seen the exact same thing with the ATO. They're really doing their best to help. So just getting on the front foot, instead of sticking your head in the sand and just not paying, just get on the phone and explain the situation and get a plan in place to pay amounts due over time. They're really open to negotiating. So don't just close your eyes and wish it would all go away. It's work with them to find something that's going to help you through. All right, there's this accommodation providers sort of support, which seems like it's upcoming. We don't know a lot about it now, except for a very general sort of little paragraph or so on the website. So I haven't seen any of this in practice yet because we don't have the details. But it seems like what's going to come out is, if you can show that your accommodation business had some cancelled room nights between that lockdown period, the 25th of June to the 11th of July, is the sort of date parameters they've put on it, then you as the business will be able to get a little bit of funds back for that. they've got them in 2 brackets: $2,000 if you've lost up to 10 cancelled nights, $5,000 if 11 nights plus were lost. It looks like this is going to have requirements built into it around the business has an ABN, has GST registration, and that you're renting the entire property, like not just a spare room. So that's going to be like to just rule out people that have just Airbnb one room in their house, I think. So I think you need to be a legitimate accommodation provider. And separately, I don't know how this one's going to apply, but it seems like there's something in the works around like the Dine and Discover hospitality vouchers that were $25 that we've seen previously. It looks like some sort of like voucher payment is going to go out in Sydney. It looks Sydney centric, of like $100 voucher. That'll I think go out to individuals. So it's a little unclear whether those are going to have to be used in, greater Sydney accommodation or whether that might be applicable up here, I sort of can't see that they would just rule out an area of the state. I mean, obviously accommodation everywhere just halted with the lockdowns. And then finally, just on individuals, I suppose something I don't really want to go into the detail on individuals, firstly because I haven't been on the forefront of it, but also just because it's basically just a Centrelink conversation, the individual stuff. But the disaster payment's the big one from 18 July. You should, I suppose, know that individuals, if they can't attend work or they've lost income due to lockdown, they could be getting a disaster payment. That disaster payment interferes with some of these other grants. So it's good to just, I think, if you understand or believe that any of your workers have been receiving that, to be transparent about that when you're making grant applications for the business. Because there's a little bit of you can't take them both at the same time. And the pandemic leave disaster payment, this one's out there. It's a taxable one. If you've been instructed to quarantine or self-isolate, we're probably not seeing a lot of that up this way. I haven't seen a lot of that across my desk, but it's out there. They're available support for individuals. Cool. And that's kind of the bulk of the information. Sorry if I breezed through a little, but I think we wanted to try and have a little bit of a question time at the end.
Thanks for that, Jack. That was great, some great insights there and well broken down. If you do have questions, please keep them coming through the chat function. I am collating and looking at them at the moment. Jack, have you got the questions which were submitted pre today? Have you got them? I've got them handy if not.
I don't have them handy. I kind of turned the emails off.
I'll read them out. So we had a couple from Club Yamba. Well, first one was details on the accommodation provider support payments that were announced in July.
Mm-hmm.
Anything extra you can add to that hasn't already been covered?
Not really, yeah. So that one looks like, it's not going to be about, I think the important thing to focus on there is that we have dates they've given. They're those like June, July dates. You've basically got to show the business was hurting back then. It's not about like things we haven't been making money now. So you can definitely get prepared there and pull your records together to say, look, in that window, I'll just pull that up again. In that window of 25 June to 11 July, we had X amount of nights cancelled, and you already know your answer. That'll definitely get you ready and prepared to get your application in. That looks like it's just a one-off. It's not going to be an ongoing payment.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. There's another one about the dates, which I feel has been covered. One from Timbertown. Apart from any potential state or federal help, how can local government councils help right now with businesses struggling to pay local council fees, rates, water, etc.? I think you kind of covered that at the end. It's about communication and getting in touch with them. I think, more than any other time in history, people are open to help in dynamic ways if they can. I'm not sure if you have any further advice there.
So, yeah, definitely. I think no one's going to be able to give you a straight answer on that. You need to look, obviously, really in your local community. The best place is just dealing directly with the council, but you'd also have like small business support providers, I think, closer to you that I think will have a lot more familiarity, and they'll be across what's working and what people are gaining access to. I will speak specifically about COFs. I know that the council here is trying to help people and just set up payment plans to stagger payments. There was a grant that went on, which some of you probably applied for. I think it was about $1,500, and it wasn't money. It was just credits, basically government credits. So, and they could be used against rates and council fees and licenses and things, to my knowledge. I wasn't on the front line with it because it was basically one that businesses were just encouraged to handle on their own. But the council, Service New South Wales, even the ATO, if you really had to simplify it, they'd just rather get paid at all than just have businesses fold and not get paid. Think about you running your own business. You would rather work with people that owe you and get paid over time than just not get paid because they collapse. So yeah, it's about bonding together and just being open communications, I think. So in the first instance, you could just call and ask, what can you offer to sort of assist?
Yeah, I agree with that. And with certain businesses, we've helped them with their councils on occasion, look at licensing and look at other fees, because some of them were based on historical revenues, and we've been able to assist in that way and getting them to reflect current licensing on current revenues as well. So yeah, great advice there about getting in contact. Some questions have been submitted. Tim Jack Adams, COVID business grants, are those dates being extended with the extra lockdowns? Unless there's secret advice being passed around between accountants, I don't think you'll know that answer.
COVID business grants. So that's the opening one we're on.
Yeah.
That's meant to be a one-off. That's meant to be a one, I think I sort of touched on it, but that's meant to be one that just helps with that 3-week pain when we sort of all got thrown in the deep end with it. And then it's supposed to be the JobSaver steps in as your sort of ongoing support payment. So I can't really tell you if they're going to come up with something else again. It sort of depends if we have more lockdowns happen again and again. But JobSaver's the shining light, I would think, through all of this, than just a one-off payment.
Yeah, I sit on a Visa Economy meeting every Friday that Minister Ayres attends, and we pepper him with questions all the time. Is this going to be extended? Is that going to be extended? Can we get extra Dine and Discover for our stakeholders? We get the same answer every week. New South Wales government gives a variety of support measures for our constituents. We're reviewing them all the time. And and I understand that it's such a dynamic environment. You can't predict what will be in 2 weeks, what will be the most pressing, and where they'll go with that. So very hard to predict any of these things. Another one from Diana Roberts: is a micro business grant an option for not-for-profits that don't employ, are run by volunteers, but have lost all income?
I think it is. I think it's fine for not-for-profits run by volunteers.
If we need to check some of these, we can come back to, we've got everybody on the database who's attending today. So if we can't answer any questions right now.
Michael, if I can just interrupt, I did pop a direct message back to Diane just because this is a very, I guess, nuanced question, but it does say that if a business or a not-for-profit is not eligible but is suffering financial hardship, they may be eligible through the hardship review pathway, and more information will be coming soon. It was fairly detailed, so I thought I would look whilst Jack was speaking.
There's no harm in applying and just being completely transparent. I'm just trying to get my head around as well. There must be something to do with dealing with people that's making that difficult. It's not like costs. If it's running through like volunteers, basically, it's around health orders that's making the business difficult, I guess.
Okay. Next one, Ryan Fowler, for micro business grants, will you lose if you don't qualify for one fortnight, but do for the next fortnight?
Right. Okay, the ongoing testing. In complete transparency, I haven't seen that situation happen yet. It's a bit of an unknown. I would think that I don't think you just drop out completely. I would think that there'll be it's just probably, I understand it's an email going out. They send an email from Service New South Wales and you've got to click through, it's very high level, very simple. You might fail in one fortnight and then you probably just get the same email a fortnight later. I don't think you're bombed out for the full rest of the program.
Okay. I've got one from Beck Morley, recent winner of the Meeting and Events Australia Best Destination Bureau or Marketing for Business Events last night, North Coast. If a director who takes money from the business only when they can is not consistent, could we also apply for JobSaver? We have no employees, just 2 directors who work the business.
Job save, right. That's fine. Right. In the first instance, you've got to talk to your accountant about that, because those payments have to get the single touch payroll stuff. There's a single touch payroll issue there. You've got to talk to your accountant about, because they're making that harder from July. You need to, I think, basically be on payroll. That'll get harder. But JobSaver was all around employees, wasn't it? Non-employers, primary income, can only claim for one business. Cool. On face value, it would seem, I haven't seen it in practice, is the straight up answer. But if it plays out like JobKeeper did on a similar situation, it might be that only one person can be what they called a business participant. You could put forward one director that wasn't on the payroll. But if you had two directors that weren't on the payroll, you can only claim for one of them, not two. It might play out like that, but I couldn't tell you with 100% certainty right now. But you need to talk to your accountant about that, about possibly putting yourselves on the payroll.
Okay. Got one from Glendale here. It seems a little cryptic to me, so we might need to enable him to speak if you feel the same. So small business fees and charges rebate. There's all really states there. Is that enough for you to go on, or should we?
I think he was providing the link for Jack when he was speaking about the local council fees and charges rebate. Was my understanding of that one, unless Glenn is still online and wants to explain further.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Glenn, I think I unmuted you, Glenn, if you're there.
Yeah, that was correct. I was just giving the link.
Okay, no worries. Thanks, mate. Okay.
Could I just, I suppose, throw in one little piece of, I think, what is good general advice? It's been like 18 months or something now that we're rolling through all these like support programs that are being made up on the fly, and you can't blame anyone for this. But there's an absolute theme in all of this that now more than ever, if you're not using really like a cloud accounting solution, it's worth just jumping across, because you have all the access to numbers really simply, really easily. And lots of the time you can see patterns in these grants where the focus is on assisting businesses that employ. If you have all those records constantly up to date, and I love Xero, but you don't have to. You should probably just play with whatever your accountant's comfortable with, because you guys are going to be in partnership together there dealing with it. If you haven't moved your records into some sort of very easy to keep up to date at all times cloud solution, there's really no reason not to. It matters so much at times like this where you need information on the fly. Anyone that's got to keep doing if it ends up being 2-week reporting for JobSaver, anyone who needs to keep doing that manually going forward, that's either going to be a lot of time for you to deal with or a lot of costs for your accountant to deal with. So just rip the Band-Aid off and do it, I think, if you haven't already.
Yep. Okay. Kim Gallery, we have a couple of brand new businesses who opened earlier this year. Then we had floods, then COVID. So they can't prove reduction in income. Anything available for them?
There's all those alternative tests. There might be a way in anyway. Where was that? I had like aggregated annual turnover. There's all these tests around here. So like I saw a cafe that didn't, something similar. They just basically didn't exist. They didn't have comparative periods. And there's a way in by basically grabbing like suggesting a 2 weeks, a 14-day period that was, I think, an average. So we took like the more recent, I think we took the 3 months from sort of April, May and June, and then which was like relatively normal for the business. And then we sort of averaged that into what would a 14-day average sales be. And we used that as a comparative going in. I don't have the outcome on that yet. That's still being assessed, but there's a way in through looking at these like alternative rules. If you just don't, what Service New South Wales want you to come up with is, here's a representative comparative period, and then here's how things are now, and things have obviously gotten worse. And they might just ask some more questions. If obviously you're a bit of a special case, special consideration situation, they're going to ask you probably to just, we'll demonstrate that that's a realistic normal 14 days. It's not a reason to back away from it. It's just probably you're going to have to answer a few more questions.
Okay, thank you. Another one from Diana. Not sure if you're about to answer this one. Given the impact of the Queensland border closure on northern New South Wales and the fact that people are lobbying for regions not to be opened up to Sydney-siders, do you think the micro grant will be extended for the impacted regions?
I don't think it's tied to it seems like it's because the the micro business grant is around until lockdowns reside they stop. I think that's going to come down to like the LGA. Like Sydney might be finished with it, and if you're still in a place where people can't freely come and go, the logic would imply that you would remain eligible. It seems like that's going to be considered on like an LGA level. Like it depends where you are.
Okay, that's all the questions that we have, and that takes us to 10:59. Very nice indeed, everybody. Any final questions from the floor? Give you another 20 seconds to put them in. As we're waiting there, this session has been recorded and we will put it on our website. A notification of that will go out through our newsletter. So if you're looking to access or find some of this information as well. Lots of great stuff covered here today and a lot to take in. So yeah, I appreciate some people may need to go back over this as well. Some great advice by Jack. Work with the accountant, work with the relevant authority. I've seen some really amazing compromises and concessions given by different levels of government throughout all this. It is worth asking the question. And as Jack kept saying, keep your books in order. It's probably never been a more important time to do so. So no further questions. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks again, Jack, for your time and for your presentation today. That's been great. And thank you to everyone for joining us.
I'll if it helps, I'll send you there's a info doc that I've been putting together, just what it looks like the ongoing 2-week reporting thing's going to look like. It just might be that it shifts a little, but I can send you the information we have so far and you can distribute that if you feel like it.
That'd be fantastic. We'll distribute to everybody who registered for this today. That'd be great. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
That's it. Thanks, everybody. And thanks again for tuning in. Much appreciated.